You've probably heard the term nepotism babies thrown around a whole lot lately. It's a huge topic, right? But what's the real story? What really happens when Hollywood starts to feel more like a family business? In this explainer, we're going to dig into the idea that this isn't just about some people getting an unfair head start. It might actually be hurting the quality of the movies and shows we all love to watch. For most of the biggest names in Hollywood, getting to the top was a total grind. We're talking years of auditions, rejections, and just fighting for a shot. But for a select few, the kids of industry insiders, that path is already paved. They don't have to claw their way in. The doors are often just held open for them. And that huge difference, that's where our story really kicks off.
All right, so here's our game plan. First, we'll look at those two very different paths to a career in Hollywood. Then we're going to jump into some specific case studies that show the potential problems, from the pressure of being a leading man to this thing called the experience gap. We'll even compare two brothers from a super famous family, check out what a safety net looks like, and finally tie it all together to see the real impact on the industry.
So what really separates these two paths? Well, on one side, you have the self-made actor. For them, the pressure is immense. One big flop could be the end of their career. But on the other side, you've got the nepotism beneficiary. For them, a movie bombing is, well, it's just a bump in the road. There's almost always another big opportunity waiting right around the corner thanks to those family connections. Okay, so our first case study is John David Washington, son of the absolute legend Denzel Washington. His career is a really fascinating look at what can happen when an actor gets pushed into the mega spotlight maybe a little before they're truly ready to carry a massive movie on their shoulders. Look, Washington's career started out super strong. His background as a pro football player made him a natural fit for HBO's Ballers. Then he knocked it out of the park in BlacKkKlansman, a fantastic performance in a role that was perfect for him. His early choices were just smart, But then came Tenet. And this is really where the argument starts. With Christopher Nolan's Tenet, Washington was suddenly at the very center of this giant, complicated blockbuster. The feeling was that the role was just bigger than him. He didn't quite have that movie star gravity to anchor the whole thing, and it created this weird disconnect where audiences just couldn't latch on to the main character. After Tenet didn't exactly light the world on fire, a bunch of his other movies also had trouble finding an audience. And yet, he was still given the lead role in The Creator, a massive $80 million sci-fi film. And it failed too. And that right there is the key. For pretty much any other actor without his last name, a track record like that would mean you're probably not leading another big-budget Hollywood movie for a long, long time. This brings us to our next case study, which highlights a totally different kind of issue. We're going to look at Louisa Jacobson, who is Meryl Streep's daughter, and a concept called the experience gap. It's basically the idea that an actor's work can suffer when their own privileged life is a million miles away from the struggles their character is supposed to be feeling. So what exactly is this experience gap? Well, think of it like this. Actors draw from a well of real-life emotions, things like rejection, heartbreak, and just plain old hardship. That's what helps them build empathy and create characters that feel real to us. But what happens when that well is kinda shallow? When an actor has never really had to struggle, it can be incredibly tough to fake those feelings convincingly on screen. And that leads us straight to the Gilded Age. Jacobson landed a huge leading role right after graduating from the Yale School of Drama, but her performance got a lot of criticism from viewers. The argument was that her character, a woman from a prominent family suddenly facing a new and difficult world, needed a kind of emotional depth that Jacobson, because of her very different life experience, just couldn't seem to find. She ended up feeling like the weak link in an otherwise amazing cast. I mean, this chart really lays it all out, doesn't it? On one side, you've got the typical actor's journey of struggle, which builds up this deep well of real experience. And on the other, you have a path where someone can graduate from an elite school and walk directly into a lead role. The claim here is that you can actually see that lack of lived experience, that lack of having to fight for it, right? There in the final performance. Now for what might be the most direct comparison you could ever make. We're going to look inside one family at two very, very different outcomes. Tom Hanks' sons, Colin and Chet. Their careers are this powerful example of how upbringing, even within the same famous family, can totally shape an artist's entire life. The difference between them really seems to boil down to how they grew up. Colin was born before his dad was a global megastar, and he had a pretty normal childhood. Chet, on the other hand, was born right at the peak of his father's fame and grew up surrounded by insane luxury. And the result?
Colin quietly built this solid, respected career as a great character actor, while Chet, well, he struggled and has honestly become more famous for controversy than for any of his work. And this quote about Colin just says it all. Because he had a more grounded upbringing, he developed this really crucial self-awareness. He knew he wasn't his dad, and he didn't try to be. Instead, he carved out his own niche and built a career on his own terms. And by doing that, he totally sidestepped his father's enormous shadow. This brings us to our final and maybe most troubling idea, the nepotism safety net. And for this, we're going to look at Emma Roberts, the niece of Julia Roberts. Her story isn't so much about her performances, but more about how powerful family connections can make professional consequences just disappear.
Okay, just look at this sequence of events. In 2013, Emma Roberts was arrested after a domestic violence incident. For almost any other rising actor, that is a career-ending scandal, full stop. But in the very same year, she was cast in American Horror Story, the show that would totally redefine her career. And it just so happens, the creator of that show, Ryan Murphy, is a very, very close friend of her aunt, Julia Roberts. And it wasn't just a one-off thing. There's a documented pattern of alleged unprofessional behavior. Accusations of bullying on set, clashing with co-stars, being disrespectful to crew members. Any one of these would be a huge red flag for a production. But for her, the high-profile jobs just kept on coming. This is the safety net in action. While other actors get held accountable and can see their careers vanish over a single mistake, her connections seem to provide this shield. Consequences that would be devastating for anyone else just don't seem to stick. Okay, so we've looked at miscasting, the experience gap, and this safety net. But why does any of this really matter? What's the grand total effect on Hollywood as a whole? Well, this is the ripple effect. Every big role that goes to an unprepared Nepo baby is a role that's taken away from a more deserving, talented actor. This can lead to weaker performances, like we talked about with Louisa Jacobson, and it can contribute to really expensive flops, like in the case of John David Washington. Over time, it creates this closed-off system where new, exciting talent can't break through. Seriously, think about it. The normal ways we used to find new movie stars, from TV shows, from small indie films, those pipelines are getting clogged up by people who are already connected. And if the next generation of truly great actors can't even get in the door because all the spots are already taken, the whole industry just becomes, well, less vibrant and a lot less interesting. And that leaves us with this final question. Hollywood was always built on the idea that talent, charisma, and hard work were the things that mattered most. That was the currency. But what happens when that currency gets replaced by your last name and who you know? What does the future of entertainment really look like then? It's definitely something to think about next time you're watching a movie.